as usual, most people just keep themselves on mute until we open it up for questions, if there are any. If anybody does have questions, as usual, just you can drop them in the group chat, or we'll come to those, or you can just save them when we kind of open it up for questions. The summit's really all about self-rediscovery. So just so you know a little bit more about Ankush, I think I explained a little bit, but I think most people come to the kind of journey of self-rediscovery thinking that it's all about kind of changing who we are or fixing something in the external, and I came to see that it was much more about seeing actually who we already were and who we've always been, kind of beyond all our thinking, which I know you have also seen as well, and kind of living more from wisdom and seeing how we can be moved from there instead. And so we've heard from lots of different speakers as we've been going, kind of all exploring different topics really, which is why I thought this topic would be a lot of fun to explore, because we haven't really dived into money, and I think that's one of the common things that people all feel they suffer with at times, and it's almost like it's the exclusion to the three principles in a way. So I'm kind of excited to see what your input is on that. So we've just been exploring lots of different topics every Friday, and then along the way I'm on hand to kind of answer questions. So we've got the Self-Rediscovery Facebook community as well, so if anybody has any questions that they don't feel comfortable asking, I'm always there to kind of help with that as well. But yeah, today we're exploring money without boundaries with Ankush, so I'm very excited, and I liked your post on Facebook, your reply about kind of how professional you were. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but you posted this little picture of you with rose petals and that did make me laugh. So yeah, we're here to basically explore money, and I feel like you're going to kind of bust a myth about how our money boundaries are kind of, we create our money boundaries, and the idea that we can't create a life that we love based on fears about money, I guess. I don't know, we're going to see where this goes, but just to introduce you a little bit before we go into a more human conversation, because I know you talked very much about this being a practical kind of support as well. It's kind of a more practical ways that we can look at money. But you're a life coach and business consultant who helps clients dramatically change the direction of their lives, whether their career, personal relationships, or health. Started coaching in 2012. You underestimated the impact it would have on your own life. And all your work is informed by your understanding of the principles behind our state of mind. And you find that when we understand the logic behind our behaviours, the behaviours change almost effortlessly. As well as being a coach, trainer and speaker, you also run powerful men's and powerful women's immersions, which are invite-only events for men and women who aspire towards excellence in their lives. And one of your favourite quotes, which I really loved actually when I was diving into this, was that a coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so you can be who you've always known that you could be, by Tom Landry. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a formal intro to you, and I thought you could just go from there. And I always usually just offer to start with to invite you to share kind of your personal journey, and whether there's anything that you've particularly seen yourself. I don't know if there's anything with money that has been in your own kind of journey that you've seen something different about, or just open it up for you to share really. So welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on your summit. And I appreciate it. It's quite a mouthful with the introduction, but thank you for that. I've had quite a lot of a journey. I guess I'll put it. People probably heard me talk, or some people have heard me talk about my journey, but I'll talk about that through the slant of money, based on the conversation we're having today. I've had a lot of an interesting upbringing with regards to money, and I'm probably not alone in hearing from my parents, like money doesn't grow on trees, and just wait till you have to earn money, then you'll value it. And so there was a lot of inherited, should I say, a lot of thinking around money, but also actually in many ways I was quite different to my siblings. So I looked at my parents, who seemed to, I mean, it was a weird. We had a weird upbringing. We seemed to be. I had quite a privileged upbringing in some ways.
Mm.
I went to I was privately educated, and we lived in a nice house. Um, but on the other hand, it never seemed like my parents ever had enough.
Mm.
And we're always scrapping and saving, and compared to my peers, if you like, and family growing up, we kind of, it felt like we were the kind of the poorer relation.
Mm.
And my response to that was always like, okay, money's limited, so I was a big saver.
Yeah.
Whereas my siblings were really not. And so I don't want to make out like my upbringing kind of resulted in me being a certain way. It was my interpretation of
Yeah.
seeing my parents and seeing how we were brought up that I then said, okay, to me it makes sense to live and save a lot of money and have money put away for a rainy day.
I love that,
um,
because even just that kind of shows you that it's, if it was really not just our thinking that was creating these stories, everybody would think exactly the same, because everybody would have the same experience if you were all kind of subject to the circumstances.
yeah, absolutely. And kind of, I had a really messed up couple of beliefs around money. One of my beliefs was, so I don't know if I can share this story, but because I guess it's been recorded. But so let me put it this way. So I knew someone who, growing up, who was so had put so much around money that they did things illegally,
Mm.
uh, to the detriment of my family. Let's put it that way. I'm going to give it as vague as possible.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, and so for me, I had this kind of belief that rich people are bad, or the kind of having a lot of money. After a certain amount, like it was okay to have a certain amount of wealth, but
Mm.
above a certain level, then that just became greed, and it was wrong and bad.
Yeah.
And I associated that with a particular person that I knew growing up,
Yeah.
or a particular family, I should say, growing up. And so that because I didn't want to be like that person, or that family. um, I kind of, I see in hindsight, I kept myself from earning more money,
Mm.
right? And I remember kind of having this belief that I just want to earn a kind of modest income. I want to have a nice little house, 2 kids. Like, this was kind of my thing growing up, and like
Yeah.
just be like very average and very, just like, be happy.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But it was only years later that I saw that there was a whole lot behind that.
Yeah.
So sometimes we see this thing with like the iceberg, that we just see the tip of the iceberg poking up above the water, and then there's all this stuff going on underneath. And certainly I had that around money, and my thinking around money.
Yeah.
um and that kind of followed through all throughout my 20s. I tried to start a business. I didn't know what business to start. Anytime someone gave me a good idea, right, it was too risky, or it wouldn't work. um and so I kind of had these really weird beliefs, where on one hand I wanted to make money because I would see other people who were more successful than me financially, and be jealous, and
Mm.
like, oh, they're doing better than I am. And then, kind of even deeper than that, I had this other belief that earning too much was bad somehow, or greedy, or selfish, or it would mean I was a bad person. So all this internal conflict, the kind of, all unbeknownst to me in many ways, it was all subconscious, was
Yeah.
really affecting the way that I was living. And when I got introduced to the three principles, when I was 30, stuff started to shift around money, and a lot of it again was unconscious. That, like, I looked back and I was like, oh, the last year I don't think that about money anymore, or that's shifted and that's changed.
Mm.
um, and then some of it was more conscious work around money, and I started kind of doing a bit more reading around the subject and looking into it, and I discovered a whole lot of thinking that I had around money that I didn't realize was thinking. I thought it was fact or just the way things were.
Yeah.
Um, and the more that started to shift, the more income flowed to my life, and it didn't coincide with me being more unhappy or turning into a selfish or greedy person or anything like that. And it's interesting because, you know, one of the things I see in the three principles community, and you know, I don't think this is an unfair thing to say, but I noticed that a lot of people I speak to um, have a lot of similar beliefs or thinking around money that I used to have.
Mm.
And it doesn't look like it's thinking. It looks like fact or real or whatever. And it
Yeah.
really gets in the way, not only of earning, but it actually gets in the way of service. It gets in the way of helping people.
Mm.
It gets in the way of having a bigger impact in the world,
Yeah.
right? And you know, I'm kind of speaking generally, but you know, sometimes individually, it's such a blind spot for people. It was such a blind spot for me that it was
Yeah.
only when it was pointed out that I started to see it.
It really feels like it's one of those topics that the three principles just doesn't apply to at times. It's kind of like one of those things that, yeah, that I think a lot of people kind of, yeah, just can't see the principles in application. But there's a couple of things that you shared there which just kind of point to the nature of thought creating our experience of money. You know, it's so interesting, and there's the kind of almost like we kind of sacrifice, because we believe this thinking which looks really true, we kind of sacrifice our true possibility, and so it feels to me it's almost just again like peeling back those thoughts and seeing that they are thoughts, and actually beyond that is what's truly possible for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I have a very offensive joke to some people, which I want to share around money because why not? And I shared this in my Facebook group, and a lot of people found it funny, and a few people got upset. So why not upset some more people? And the joke that I said was, how do you know that someone's been learning the three principles? Um, and the answer was because they're poorer. And and a lot of people laughed about it because it, like, that seems to be true, that and it was true for me. We get into the principles and like, oh wow, this is fantastic, and then you sign up for a course, and you sign up for another course, and I would notice that so people would be like happier and happier, and they would be diving deeper and deeper into the principles, and their bank balance would be getting lower, right? And I would notice this, and I think this isn't something that we should shy away from, as
Mm,
in my opinion, as a community. And I don't think it's something that we shouldn't talk about, because like, I've spoken about this to a few people, and like, everyone sees it. It's kind of like this thing that nobody talks about, because like, oh, that doesn't fit a narrative of the principles being wonderful and whatever. And I'm not saying they aren't wonderful, I think they are. But to me, if it's resulting in this phenomenon of, you know, people realizing, oh, I don't need this job to be happy, I don't need this, and I've seen people quit their jobs, I've seen people trying to become three principles coaches or facilitators,
mm,
or maybe not, maybe just like, okay, I realize life works inside out, and they make some changes, and then I see people a year, 2 years, 3 years later, and they're really struggling, and sometimes they won't say it publicly. But
mm.
I've spoken to people who said, hey, I'm in 50 grand's worth of debt. Hey, I'm
Wow.
in 100 grand's worth of debt. I spoke to a guy, this is God's honest truth. He goes, I'm in £150,000 of debt right now. Now, not all of that was down to the principles or courses, right? Well, none of it's down to the principles, but it wasn't down to necessarily just 3P courses, but it exacerbated it.
Mm,
And I think is and I think about that. I'm like, well, why is that? What's kind of going on there?
yeah.
And for me, I think it's really important to talk about, because, you know, and this was me, by the way. I got into the 3Ps. I signed up for a training. I spent thousands of pounds, and I got to the end of the training, and I was a lot happier, and life was a lot better. And I mean, I was doing it as a coach, as a professionally, and I'd made, I think, £150 in coaching fees that I charge clients. And I signed up for it thinking, yeah, this is going to replace my main job, and I didn't need to make tons of money, but just have an income that I could, live off. And it was like, there's no one can live off £150, a year. And so, and I was taking a lot of action as well. So there really is something to see there. And for me, the principles are a fundamental understanding of how life works, right? And they are fact. There's no exceptions. I'm not saying money's an exception or the three principles is bad. Or I'm saying we as a community need to look at, well, why is it that this phenomenon seems to occurring? What's missing in the way that we're explaining it? What's missing in the way this is being communicated? What are the blind spots maybe that, so I see it as, what are the blind spots I might be having in communicating this?
Yeah.
And one of the things that my coach helped me really see around money was, in general, money is a reflection of service, right? Money is a reflection of value, right? So now I'm not talking about just coaching. I'm saying, like, if you have a job, right, and you work doing a job, your employer pays you money, not because they just feel generous and, oh, it's a nice thing to do. They're paying you because you are delivering a service. So if you're a fireman or a teacher or an accountant or whatever, you are delivering a service to your employer, and the employer, the idea is, gets more value from what you deliver than they pay you. Otherwise, what's the point of them paying you? That's just common sense, right? Well, this also applies if you have your own business, whatever you do. And there's a little thought experiment that you can do with this, is like, think about and let's you and I do it, Nicole, right? Think about your favorite musician or your favorite band, right? Go.
What, you want me to tell you who they are?
Yeah. I'm good, but I can't read your mind.
I thought you meant just like in my head. Yeah. Well, let's go for Bryan Adams.
Okay. Bryan Adams. How much money have you paid Bryan Adams, either through buying his music or seeing him in concert or whatever, buying his merchandise? How much money have you paid Bryan Adams, in your life, roughly?
God, I don't know. Not that much, actually.
Ballpark figure.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe £500.
Okay. So £500. If I said, Nicole, I'm going to give you £500, and in return, we are going to erase Bryan Adams from existence. Right? You'll never know he existed. You'll never experience his music. You won't remember any of it. Would you take £500?
No.
Right? Which tells me that the value that Bryan Adams has created in your world is worth at least £500. It's probably worth a lot more than that.
For sure. Yeah.
Right? Because if we played the game and went, okay, what if I gave you 1,000? We'd eventually get to a number, but it would be far, far bigger than £500.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Bryan Adams has done that for a number of people, which is probably, I don't know what his net worth is, but I'm guessing he's created a lot of wealth for himself and probably other people, but through the value he's generated.
Yeah, well, he's also created a lot of joy, right? So that's,
Right. Which is value.
Yeah.
Right. Joy is valuable for people. You hear a song and it can transport you back to a memory. It can evoke emotions, all these sort of things. Right. So when we look at musicians, we see that. Now, I'm a big Avengers fan. I'm a big kind of like Marvel fan.
Yeah.
And I think, was it last year that the second Avengers movie came out, and it was like the biggest grossing movie of all time. And I think it was scheduled to make like $1 billion at the box office. And I use this as an example with my clients, where I said, if I said, you can't go and see the Avengers movie, right? For anyone that was a fan.
Yeah.
I said, if you can't go and see the Avengers movie, never going to be able to see it, right? What would you be willing to pay?
Mm.
And the numbers were way, way, way more than the
Yeah.
cost of a cinema ticket,
Yeah.
right?
No,
So a
that's so
cinema
true.
ticket, what, £5, £10 nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And easily, I said, if I said 100, I'll give you £100, you can't go and see Avengers 2, no one would take it who's a fan of the movies,
Yeah.
right? So again, people see like, oh, well, they made a superhero movie, they made $1 billion. Well, no, they spent years, for those people who know that kind of film universe, but really creating lots of movies, really putting time, attention, detail, all the rest of it over time, creating this value for people that they'd want to go and see the movies, and they were rewarded with people's money, with value,
Mm.
by over delivering,
Mm.
right? And that's kind of just a very basic principle, not the principles, but basic principle of money.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, it became really, really simple. It was like, oh yeah, I've never really thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but it's really, really simple.
And
Now,
practical too.
yeah, really practical too. And now, how does the three principles apply to that? Well, for me, when I first got introduced to principles, I was in a corporate job. I had tons of misunderstanding. I used to get angry at work. I used to get procrastinate. I used to put things off. I wasn't really the most effective or efficient. I was good at my job. I was well respected. But if I'm really honest, what I was delivering compared to what I could deliver was way more.
Mm.
Now, when I got introduced to principles, I started performing way better at work. Not because I was motivated, but just as I dropped a ton of misunderstandings that I had, I started to perform better.
Yeah.
And we went through a process where everyone had to reapply for their jobs. Big companies do this all the time. And so everyone was scared for their jobs. And my boss actually came back to me and said he could see, number one, that I changed. And I was telling him that I was learning this 3P stuff, and I was started sharing it at work. And he said, I can't really tell you this, right? But off the record, because there were a few people applying for the job, because that job, it's yours if you want it.
Mm.
And we're going to pay you £10,000 extra, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
Why did he do now? He didn't do that for everyone in the team, but
Mm.
why did he do that for me?
Yeah.
Because, well, historically I'd performed. Over the last 6-8 months, he'd seen I'd really given a ton of value.
Mm.
And for him, it was worthwhile them paying me more money to retain me
Yeah.
than them going out, finding someone else who'd have to learn everything new, and they wouldn't know if they were any good, or all of that stuff, right? And I was like, God, if I'd really seen this 10 years earlier, I would have made a lot more money in my corporate career,
Mm.
because it sounds really obvious, but it hadn't been that crystal clear to me that if I want to get paid more at work, I've just got to give them way more value than I'm getting paid.
Mm.
And either they'll pay me more or someone else will pay me more. It's
Yeah.
that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so cool. And that just, to me, again, just going back, because you said about how, investing in the three principles programs and things like that, people often question, the value because they ended up in debt, but actually that shows kind of almost the opposite. It's kind of like, well, the value was created in the dropping away of the misunderstandings that allowed you to then kind of, yeah, again, it kind of, I talk about unraveling a life you love. That's kind of what happened with money there for you.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I'm not saying this to knock things. I always say, if we want to change something,
Mm.
right, and I'm using the vernacular, it's from the inside out. Well, I feel like I'm inside the 3P community,
Mm.
and it's not a perfect community, and there are some blind spots we have around money. And maybe I'm going to get a call from a 3P police person tomorrow saying, we heard you say this on a webinar yesterday. But I think it's really important to talk about it. And I won't mention names, but I've spoken to some first generation teachers about this, and I said, have you noticed this? And a number of them, like I said, I'm not mentioning names, I go, yeah, we've noticed it too.
Yeah.
And so there's something going on, and I don't know whether there's kind of a belief that, okay, if I learn the principles, then suddenly my life's going to become better, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. It can
Yeah.
really help.
I'm
it's
just thinking
really
back to
helped
my
me.
own experience, because when I first came across the principles, I kind of dropped into that spaciousness and that peace, and I kind of heard there was nothing to do. So then I just kind of sat back. I'm like, well, great, nothing to do. Money's just going to arrive in my lap. I'm just going to sit here and wait, and like there's nothing that I have to do. And then I was like, oh, wait a second, no, we're creating our experience of life, and that means that we can create what we want. But that involves still doing stuff like providing service that will kind of, lead to money. So I don't know whether that's kind of playing into it there, because that was kind of almost the two parts of my journey, was seeing that, we have this wisdom to life, and there isn't anything to do to be psychologically okay, but we can still play and dance with life to create a life that we love. And I feel that's what this kind of, what you're talking about here, kind of falls into, is that kind of more unraveling a life we love by adding value and creating joy and all of that sort of stuff, that then leads to us being able to see something different about those boundaries and create more money, I guess. As well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is in so many different things. So like some people might have heard of the University of Santa Monica. So they are a spiritual, they're not 3P, but the spiritual university, and they talk about the soul line and the goal line, right? So they say like there's kind of the goal line, which is the outer world of success, right? And then there's the inner world, which they call the soul line.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this aligns completely with what George Pransky has termed the game of life, i.e. the goal line, and
Yeah.
living, which is the
Yeah.
soul line.
Yeah.
And to me, understanding living, i.e. understanding the principles, some people might call it raising your level of consciousness, um, that helps you if you want to create in the world. I think it can be really helpful. It's been really helpful for me.
Yeah,
And
for me as
it
well,
doesn't,
it's kind of like seeing who we are and seeing what's possible, I think, is what that helps with.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something to do. So as you kind of rightly pointed out, that um, when we say in the 3P community, there's nothing for you to do, that doesn't mean don't do anything and stay in bed, as you know.
Yeah.
It means there's nothing to do on the level of your thinking to feel better,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that, I love using the analogy of small children, right?
Mm.
My little boy, 7 months old, he doesn't need to think himself into a happy state,
Yeah.
right? He's present in the moment. He's the 3 principles in action.
Yeah.
And from that place, he's all over the place. He's crawling, he's exploring, he's opening stuff, he's pulling things out, right? And he's doing all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, we see kids who are like, wow, they've got boundless energy,
Yeah, I love
right?
that. They're kind of like these perfect little creators.
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing for us, that there's nothing we need to do on the level of our thinking to feel better or feel happier or change our thinking. Nothing to do, right? Point towards the principles, see how we experience life. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And then in the world of form, in the game of life, right,
Yeah.
on the goal line, if you want to, not because you think achieving
Yeah.
something is going to make you happy, right, you can create whatever it is that you want to create.
Yeah.
Why? Just because,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. I love that. And that was very much my realization, was that, we don't need any of the stuff that we think we need in order to be happy. But that doesn't mean we can't choose which way we want to focus our creation to then kind of have whatever we desire, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm just looking at the time, and I could talk, as you can probably tell, for the full hour, so I have no problem with that. But I would really love it if it's possible. I don't know if you do this. Are we able to take questions from the
Yeah,
audience?
sure.
Because
Has anybody got a question? Would anybody like to come on and just raise a hand if you would like to come on and chat to us live?
I think it's really helpful to kind of sometimes get into the nitty
Yeah,
gritty, or
for sure.
you know make it really relevant to someone.
Yeah,
Challenge me by all means, going, well, actually, Ankush, whatever. I'm very open to that, and I'm open to being wrong. So
yeah.
I think sometimes that can be a very fruitful discussion.
That's it. I don't know if nobody's raised their hand as of yet. So maybe we can carry
Maybe
on.
they've all passed out because of the heat.
Maybe. But if anybody does have a question, then just raise your hand at any point. We'll just carry on kind of exploring in the meantime.
Yeah, and if you don't want to come on the video, just use the chat function on the side.
Yeah.
If some people can be shy about kind of coming on the screen, just I'd be very happy to answer anything like this, because I think it's a very juicy topic that sometimes things can be highlighted through that comment. Oh, someone's raising their hands.
We've got one, right? Okay.
Got two.
Let me just unmute you. There we go. Okay.
I think Michelle was also waving, so we'll come back to Michelle in a second.
Okay, cool.
Hi, Ankush, and hi, Nicole. I'm sorry I can't turn my video on for some reason.
That's okay.
There's just one question which has sort of bothered me for a while. There's so much 3P content available free of charge. Sometimes I feel inhibited just asking for money if I have to sort of either give a talk or do a series of conversations or whatever. I feel not very good charging when people can get it cheap or very free. And on the other hand, there's also a lot of 3P material available at a very high price. So I'm not quite understanding that it's the same content. The content doesn't change. And yet you can either get it for free, you can either get it for thousands of pounds, and then there's all the way between. So if you could shed some light as to how does someone who's starting up as a 3P practitioner like me, how can I pitch myself knowing that there is this huge diversity in pricing?
I love this question. This is so good. Thank you for asking it. Right, very, very juicy.
Yeah.
Can I tell a story, Kajal? Is that okay?
Of course, yes, please. Thank you.
So I've been coaching and teaching and training for a while now. I've been doing it full time for 5.5 years. But when before I did that, I've been learning for nearly 8. So before I went full time, I started thinking about doing a group. All right. And so some of you might know that I run these men's immersions. I don't run the women's ones anymore, but I run these men's immersions. And so I'm going to do one. This is 2015. And I was doing a coach training type thing, a 3P training. And so my colleagues were all doing these kind of £50 half-day courses, £100 day courses. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to do that, because I'd have to do so many of them to kind of create an income that I could live on. So that didn't really appeal to me. And then I just thought, okay, let me think about this a different way. And I thought, okay, what would I like to attend? Right. So at the time, I had so Rudy and Jenny, who were together at the time, they were running these retreats. They charged, I think, about £1,000 to do these retreats, and I went to 2 of them in 2014. One with Elsie and one with Dickin, and they were really great, lovely location, all the rest of it. And I thought, God, why would anyone pay me when for £1,000 they can go and spend time with a first generation teacher in this lovely location, accommodation included, all the rest of it? And so I thought to myself, okay, well, what would I like to have that they didn't provide? Right? Just blue sky it. And so what I thought was, okay, one thing I didn't like about a lot of 3P trainings was there were a lot of people on them. And I think both the retreats I attended, there were about 30 people. And I had done, when I first started training with Jamie Smart, he used to run these mastermind days, and he'd sometimes have 8 people, sometimes 12, sometimes 15. And there would be 1 days, and I would get more out of the 1 day on the smaller group than I would when he would run his bigger groups, 25, 30 people, even if, you know, it was kind of more of a formal training, because there was more time and attention on me when the group was smaller. I could be more open. There was more interaction. Again, like there's, you know, at the moment, 14 people on here. So take away me and Nicole, there's 12 participants, right? If we multiplied that by 10 and there were 120 participants, right, then we still might have got to your question, but we would be limited on, you know, the percentage of people we could address. So I found that smaller groups for myself, I got more out of. So I said, okay, well, my immersion, I'm going to limit it to 12, right? I actually said to myself 8 to 12, and I got 12 on it. And I went, right, that's a smaller group, so that's better. The second thing that I saw was, if I'm going to speak to someone about the principles, and they're very, very simple at first blush, they're deceptively simple. And so there's kind of levels of understanding the principles. There's depth to the principles. So I knew, rule of thumb, that if I spend a day with a group talking about the principles, it's going to be very different compared to spending 2 days. And 2 days is going to be very different compared to 3 days. So I asked myself, what would give me real confidence that how much time would I need with a group to then say at the end of it, they would have pretty much guaranteed, as much as one can guarantee, that there would be a real sustainable change in the people who attended, right? And I came up with 3 days, right? And then I thought, well, what else? I thought, well, God, like blue sky. Well, one thing that any retreat I had attended or training I attended with a first generation teacher, there was no one-on-one time beforehand, right? So I thought, okay, well, I can do that. So I offered the people who signed up a couple of one-on-one calls with me where I could coach them. And this had a double benefit. One, it was they got coaching. Two, the benefit for me was by the time people arrived in the room, again, two more benefits. One, by the time they arrived in the room, I had a better connection with them and we had a bit of rapport going. So they were less likely to kind of be disruptive and, you know, keep putting their hand up and whatever else. And secondly, with those 2 sessions, I could get them to a certain kind of base level of understanding, so that we could go deeper in the 3 days compared to them just arriving fresh. You know, even if there were a couple of them who didn't know anything else, you kind of go back to the beginning. I'm like, well, no, if we want to go deeper and have it more fruitful, let me do that. And then the other thing I thought was there was never any pre-work. So I thought, what pre-work can I give people to, again, get them to some kind of base level of understanding? And Jamie was kind enough to allow me to share some audios that he had created, and which were kind of very good introductory resources for people with the 3 principles. Now, if you come back to what Nicole and I were talking about earlier, what am I doing? I'm creating a whole ton of value for people, right? Through the way that it's not about content. I'm delivering a service which is about helping people have a shift and have a real meaningful change, right? Sustainable change. And one of the things I did as well is, and this is just me, you don't have to do this, I really found for men, and yes, I am a man, men are much less likely to open up about stuff when there are women in the room, right? Despite what you might think, we don't just all talk about sex and women. So real vulnerable conversations, men are really reluctant to have when a woman's in the room. I really see this time and time again. And I found this for myself in my 20s. I spent a lot of time in the personal development world. And there are certain things I wouldn't have said if a woman was in the room. It doesn't mean I fancied her. I don't know what it was, but for me, it felt less safe. So my immersion was only men. And I got some flack for this. I got some people saying, well, why are you doing this just for men? And it was because from my perspective, I could see the thing that I designed would be something I would want to pay for, and it didn't exist, right? And then over the years, I've been running these now for 5 years, and they've evolved. So over time, I started noticing other things which were like, oh, that would make this better. That would be more valuable, not just bells and whistles, but like really, really meaningful. So I'll give you an example. Half the guys that used to attend the immersion would all stay together because I would recommend a hotel for them. And half of them would go for the cheapest place they could find. And what I noticed was the guys that were staying together, they would stay in the feeling. They would stay in the kind of the transformational headspace, and they would bond better. And by the end of it, they seemed to get more out of the immersion than the person who was like, right, to save a tenner a night, I'm going to go and stay in this hostel, like a 20-minute walk away in the dodgy part of town, and they're kept awake all night by someone partying in the room next door. So one of the things I did after a few years was I said, right, I'm going to charge you all £300 extra, and I'm going to cover accommodation, right? And I went out and found accommodation, which worked out to £60 a night. So I didn't make any money out of it, right? But I did that because I knew it would be valuable. And I had people who had come back, they'd been on an immersion before, and they were the one guy, and he was the one guy who'd always go for the cheapest thing. And it was really funny because he didn't need to do it for the money. He was always paid up front in advance. He had a really good job, but he just didn't understand. He didn't see the benefit. And then when I said, right, this is mandatory, I'm going to charge more, but the accommodation included, he came back and said, I'm so glad you did that. It's been a totally different experience for me, and I really value it, right? So again, it's the value that I'm generating that is having people pay me. It's not about content. Content I give away for free. Believe it or not, Nicole isn't paying me. And if you want to encourage her to change that, by all means, go ahead. But she's not paying me for this. I produce a whole ton of content which I don't charge people for, because you're right, it's available for free. Right. And it's great. I think it's wonderful that it's available for free, because people
also,
who can't
Ankush,
afford
there's
can get it.
there's different levels as well, aren't there? Because just as you're talking there, I'm thinking about my own programs, and that's exactly how I create my own programs, is that I've kind of created them around what I would desire. So they're very much kind of, like you say, they're intimate. So I restrict the numbers to 8, and that people get that 1-to-1 time, or 1-to-8 time, and so there's kind of, there's this value to that, and I've got different speakers in, and they share on, and that again adds more value. And so there's lots of different things, rediscovery reflections for in between, to help people into that transformation. So again, it's very similar to how you're describing, is that I kind of created something that I would want to attend. And like, I think there's just different levels, aren't there? That there's the free stuff, but that's not really going to allow you to transform in the same way as the stuff with the added value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see that. If I had just spent all my time listening to the free stuff that's available, it would have been really, really, really helpful for me. And if I just read the books, it would be really, really helpful for me. And I'm really glad that our community offers so much stuff for free. I think it's a wonderful service. I think Sid would be really happy about that. And I think there is a difference between that and spending. And by the way, I'm kind of walking my talk here. I pay my mentors money. So last year I went over to Lacona and spent 4 or 5 days with Keith and Valda. I think it was something like $5,000 plus my flight over, plus renting a car, plus food, plus my Airbnb. It was a big investment. But I found there was a really big difference. And I've been speaking to them, and they've been my mentors for years, but there was such a difference going there, meeting them in person, having that real intense time that no one needs to do, but it was really valuable and really helped me in my work with my clients. So I don't say this as something that, I'm not doing myself. This is just something that I really see. There is a difference. And so for people who want that, then we can create that, and people will pay for it. And I love what you said as well. Like, we both kind of pointed to this, is what would you pay for? Right. So it's a great question to ask. And this doesn't have to be with, there might be people on this call who aren't coaches or therapists or trainers. I mean, this is any business. right? What would you pay for? And there's a wonderful book, right? It's not a 3P book, but I'm going to share it. Like, it's called 100 Ways to Create Wealth by Steve Chandler. Fantastic book. And one of the things that he said in this book was, people always think, and I used to think this, we need like the greatest new thing, right? So, well, there's no point doing X or Y because other people have already done it. And he gave the example of a hardware store, right? He said, well, that's a really low tech business. It's really old. It's been around for a long time. And he said, you don't need to find a new thing. He goes, if your hardware store is just better than the existing one, you can take all of their customers and you can be very successful. And when you start thinking about things from that point of view, what have you experienced that, perhaps you didn't get the greatest customer service, or you wish things were slightly different? That's how a lot of businesses start, by creating something new, creating something that they would want that's simply not available. And I don't think you have to look very hard to find, stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of points me in that direction is when I kind of sense into what I desire, what kind of feels good to me, because if it feels good to me, then I guess it's going to feel good for other people as well. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think you talked a little bit about that earlier when you were kind of talking about how you experienced that jealousy because you could see what it was that you desired. So that kind of plays into that as well in a way. We kind of, yeah, for me it's about kind of creating from joy, and that's how I ended up creating my programs, because I was just creating something that I absolutely loved, and that just kind of attracted people to it as well. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what you're pointing to as well.
Yeah, and I'll say this because I'll forget otherwise later, if you don't mind, and if I'm not allowed to do this, tell me off. But I recorded a webinar with Steve called, and I was thinking about it before and I couldn't remember the name. It was called Waking Up versus Growing Up, and it talked about that soul line, goal line thing. That's another vernacular, waking up versus growing up. So if anybody wants that, they can email me or contact me on Facebook, whatever. I'm really happy to share that with anyone, because I think it's really, really, that was a really good distinction for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I always share the links with the replay as well. So if you just send me where's best to get people to point people towards you for that, then I'll share that in with the replay.
Cool.
So that people can find that. Yeah.
I know Michelle was waving at us, and
yes, Michelle.
Want to make sure we've got enough time for her call, her question.
Just unmute you, Michelle. There we go.
Thank you. Perfect. Hello. Thank you for this. It's very good. Now, mine's about work, because I'm not my own person. But I've always given my best in jobs. Okay, I've always been of value to my employers, and I've always sort of progressed, but never been rewarded. So I kind of feel like, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I've always given as much as I can give. And I've just never got anything back for it. I'm wondering if there's something that I'm doing that I'm projecting to people, because actually I don't really want money, but obviously you have to have money to live. So could I be projecting that somehow, that, she's quite happy with what she's got, and which is nothing, by the way, so I can't get poorer with the 3Ps. It's all good. I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to be the one who breaks the rules. I am going to make money with it.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was any help.
Yeah,
with lockdown, I'm kind of losing my job anyway. So,
well, it's a great question. I remember the job I had when I discovered the principles. The kind of the boss, the big boss, and my boss's boss, he ran the department. He said, "Look, I know people can go elsewhere and they'll earn a few £1,000s a year extra, but we're a better company and blah blah blah." So he made it really clear: if you go elsewhere, you won't. We're not going to match it. You've got to go. And because I was such a scaredy cat and I really saw the world as outside in, it was like, no, this is safe, this is secure. I'm going to stay here. And when this whole thing came about, and we had to reapply for our jobs, and I started looking out in the world around, well, what do equivalent jobs pay, and what could I earn? I realized I was really being underpaid. And my boss actually said to me, he goes, and he'd towed the kind of company line, like, yeah, we're not going to increase wages and blah, blah, blah. And so I just went along with it. And he turned around and he said, yeah, I know we've been underpaying you for a while, right? Which is partly why he offered the and it wasn't like 10K underpaid, but I probably was paid about $5,000 less than really I should have been paid. And, people, I find generally employers aren't going to pay you more out of the goodness of their hearts. There's very few employers who will do that. So there may be, now, without having a longer conversation with you, and we've got limited time, I can't say for certain, but there may be an element of that, if you just say, well, that's okay and I'm fine, and you might be fine, then you'll stay on where you're at. But if you would like to increase your earnings, increase your income, well, then again, it's just common sense, like go and speak to someone else or look at what other jobs are available and see what they're paying. And something that you can do again around creating value is ask. So I was coaching a young man, and he hired me to either get promoted or to get a kind of a new job somewhere else and get paid more. So I was coaching this guy for a while, and his boss would promise him stuff, but it would never materialize. And the thing was, and then we were in a coaching conversation once, and he was saying, look, and he had two different bosses. He had a boss, and that guy left, and he had another boss, and they were always very positive, but the promotion or the pay rise wouldn't come. And he said, well, you know what, he wants to pay me more, or he thinks I should be promoted, but his boss doesn't think so, right? So I said, well, have you had a conversation with his boss?
Yeah.
And he said, well, no. And I said, go and ask his boss, look, can I just be really honest with you? Am I ever going to get promoted here? Am I ever going to get a pay rise, or am I not? And his boss said to him, no, you won't, based on your performance historically. And he had been performing a little bit underperforming for, years before, but in their mind was made up, right? And so I said to my client, look, for them to change their mind, you're going to have to deliver so much. You're going to have to, go so far beyond what is acceptable to change their mind, that actually you might want to consider just going somewhere else. And he got a job elsewhere, which was a much better job. He got a huge, whopping big, I think £15,000 pay rise. And it was just because he was willing to go. Now, that was one side of it. And the other side of it is there's a great book, again, non-freebie book by Cal Newport called So Good They Can't Ignore You, which I, by the way, haven't read, but I've seen the book summary of it online. and I just love the title. And my client read it, and it really shifted something in him where he thought, okay, I want to be, and I had a bit of this, right? I had a bit of this when I got into the 3Ps, where I felt like it was a little bit of an old boys and old girls network, and there were certain people who would get on the stage every year and be on the circuit and whatever, and if you were a newer coach or something, you would never get in there. And I thought, I can either be upset about that, or I can be so good they can't ignore me. And if we take that approach with life, again, it's kind of over delivery, then, like I said, either your employer will retain you or promote you, whatever, or someone else will, right? And again, that's what my client found. He started showing up in that way, and that was before he asked his boss, am I going to get promoted? And they said no. But because he'd been doing that and operating at a level above really what he should have been paid, when he went elsewhere, the people that ended up employing him, they said, wow, you're doing all of this in your current job? And he said, yeah. And they went, that's not the job you're doing. That's the level above. So that's the level we're going to hire you at. But it's what he'd been doing, because he'd had that shift around, being so good, right? Like way above what he was, paid to do, if you like.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because we can get so kind of attached to the idea that life has to look this certain way and this one job is the only answer, and we forget in doing that there's so many other possibilities out there as well, and also that we can just ask. It's kind of like, well, that's so simple, isn't it? Really, when we come down to it, it's like, well, we can just ask for what we want, and without, I think when we come across the 3 principles, it's almost like we then become asking what we want without really having an attachment to the outcome, because we know that one specific job, if we ask and they say no, it doesn't really matter, because there are so many other possibilities as well out there. I think that's what the 3P often offers us, is kind of understanding that isn't really that whatever we ask for, if we don't receive it, it's not gonna actually impact us, because there's something else just waiting as well. Yeah.
Right. It's like going back to being a kid. If 5 people in a room have got a cookie and a kid goes to one, can I have a cookie, and the person says no, the small child isn't going to stay. They're going to go to the next person, because they don't have a lot of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing in a job. And I know my scarcity thinking, my thinking about where my comfort and security came from, stopped me from moving jobs in the past, because I was so scared about, well, what if I go somewhere else and it's not great, and what if this happens, and what if that happens, and it kept me earning a lot less than I could have been earning.
Yeah, and it's just thought.
Does that help, Michelle, by the way? Yeah, good.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any last questions? I think we're just on time. So no, nobody else is raising their hand. But yeah, it's that was really, really insightful. Thank you, Ankush. I really, really enjoyed that, because and I also particularly liked the bit about kind of the soul life and the goal life, and it speaks to me a little bit of my own kind of journey. Has felt very much like almost you come to the spiritual path feeling like you're going to just ascend the human experience, and then you realize, oh no, but we're still human, and we still get to play and dance in life and create what we want to create. And that kind of speaks to that. You almost then descend back into the humanness, and you're like, oh no, I can still do stuff and have fun. So yeah, I think that's kind of almost summing that up as well. And it was cool to explore that in terms of money. Yeah, and doing the doable, which I think you've kind of spoken about as well, because it's like anything is possible really when we see beyond the limitations that we're creating in our minds, even just with simple things like asking for what we want. That's cool, thank you. If you need to nip off, I've just got to do some announcements about next week. Is there anything that you want to share with us that you're doing at the moment, where people can find out more about you or anything like that?
No, I'm very busy at the moment. I'm almost full in my coaching practice. I've got an immersion coming up in October for men. So I know there are a lot of ladies in this call, but for men, I'm doing that. So if anyone's interested, they've now grown to 7 days rather than 3 days, and they've moved to a beautiful mansion in the countryside. Everything's better. So if anyone's interested in that, you can reach out. But I'm looking forward to taking a bit of a rest in July, and we're moving house. But if anyone's got any questions, I'm always available on Facebook or whatever. Just reach out. I'm very happy to, as you know, have this conversation and see if it can be helpful.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a lot of fun, and let me know and I'll pop the link in with the replay as well. If you need to pop off, I'm just going to do some announcements about the next speakers, so you feel free to leave whilst I do that. But thank you very much for joining and sharing. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Yeah, take care. So next Friday, the 3rd of July, same time, 8 p.m. BST, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm chatting with Marnix Powells, who is here to talk to us about his exciting journey of manifesting miracles and how he's allowed his inspired action. So we're going to be talking a little bit about creating again. This is going to be a lot of fun. And funnily enough, actually, Marnix was a guest I kind of manifested just before I reached out to him. I said, well, I arranged to speak to him to see about coming on the summit. And then one of the people in my program was like, oh, have you heard of Marnix? I'd really love to have him on the summit. So I was like, oh, well, there you go. So that was meant to be. And then we also have the amazing leadership coach, Elizabeth Lovius, coming to share the week after about how we can let wisdom lead. And then we have Leanne Brooke Tyler, who's amazing, sharing on living a soul-led life. So I'm really excited for that. And then there's more people like Billy Mann, who's going to be talking about life being a gift to be celebrated. Just a final invitation. I know some of you are already enrolled in the Self-Rediscovery School. We have the Foundations program. It's kind of last chance to sign up to that this weekend or this week. It starts on the 1st of July. That's going to be a 6-week program of masterclasses like I was talking about earlier, speaker montages, live group circles, and rediscovery reflections, and lots more that will help you basically get a foundational grounding in rediscovering your wisdom, help you move past whatever you feel stuck with, and begin to see how we can then create that life that we love a bit more intentionally, like we were talking about today. So yeah, there's the last few spots available for that, and it's really exciting. It's so lovely in the last round, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then I have the Unravel program, which the next one of those is October. So really excited again, loads of amazing content coming in for that, which is lighting me up, so I know it's gonna be a lot of fun. So that's kind of, you can register interest for that if that's something you're going to be interested in. That's a deeper dive than the Foundations, all about creating a life we love. And then also planning something special for January as well. So there's lots going on. If any of that's kind of speaking to you, I'm always happy to have a chat about what's right for you. So just let me know and we can arrange a discovery call. I also help people one-to-one. So again, if you're looking for that more intimate experience, I also do that. And then, yeah, other than that, I'm just going to be hanging around in the Self-Rediscovery group on Facebook. So it's lovely to have you all here, have you joining, and looking forward to next week already. But yeah, any questions, drop me a line and I'll speak to those in the group. But have a good rest of your day, or good evening, good afternoon, and I will see you soon. Mwah, that's love.